The desert valley stretched far under the golden light of the afternoon sun. The air shimmered with heat, and the ground looked endless and empty. For many years, no one had cared about this place. But today, there was movement, a small human research station stood on the edge of the valley, its metal walls marked with dust from many storms. Inside the station, Mara sat in front of a control panel. She was not tall, and her hair was tied back to keep it from falling in her eyes. She had been listening to the ground for months, using deep scanning tools that could read far below the surface. The machines mostly gave her silence or the slow shift of rock and sand. But today, something strange had happened. A sound had come through a slow, steady beat, like the heart of some buried giant. At first, Mara thought it was an error. She checked the wires and reset the system. Still, the beat continued. It was faint but steady, one breath every few seconds. Not the sound of wind, not the sound of water or machines. She leaned closer to the screen. The signal came from 4 kilometers below the desert floor. She called Var from the other side of the station. He was young, with quick hands and a curious mind. He came over, wiping oil from his fingers, and bent down to look at the display. He listened for a while, then raised his head. "That is not an echo from the scanners," he said. "That is something real and alive." Mara felt a chill in her arms. Even though the room was warm, they played the signal over the speakers, and soon the others came to listen too. Some thought it was just shifting stone. Some thought it might be an underground pocket of air. But none of them could explain why it moved in such a slow, perfect rhythm. It was not random. It was breathing. An alien observer named Selik had been sent by one of the nearby star systems to monitor the humans' work. He had tall, thin limbs and eyes that reflected light like silver. When he heard the sound, he froze. His hands twitched, and his face changed to something close to fear. He stepped back from the speakers and shook his head. "You should not dig there," he said. His voice was low and hard. "This place is a grave not for your kind." Mara asked what he meant, but Selik would not answer. He only said that the signal was a warning, not a call. His people had stories about a chamber buried deep in the ground long before their history began. They said it was sealed by many hands and marked, so no one would open it. The team gathered in the far end main room. They argued about what to do. Some wanted to leave it alone. Others wanted to send a drone to look deeper. Mara listened to them all, but in the end she knew what her choice would be. Humanity had always been the kind to explore, to look where others feared to go. The desert might hide danger, but it also hid answers. If there was something alive, or something that had been alive for thousands of years, then it could change what they knew about the galaxy. The next day, they began work. They brought heavy diggers to the site. The heat was strong, and the sand resisted their machines. But slowly the ground began to open. Each day, the signal grew a little louder and clearer. The team felt as if they were following the sound of a heartbeat down into the earth. Slick stayed far from the dig site. He watched from a distance and spoke little. When Mara passed him one evening, he said softly, "You think this is about discovery, but it is about release." Mara did not stop. She only looked at him once and then walked back to her team. By the 10th day, the diggers found something strange beneath the sand. It was a wall, but not made of stone or metal. It was smooth black crystal, and it shone faintly even in the shadow of the pit. When they touched it, they felt a slight vibration, the same rhythm as the breathing sound. The wall seemed to stretch downward and also away from them in both directions, like it was part of something much larger. Var brought out scanning tools to measure it, but the readings were hard to believe. The wall was not only deep, it was hollow inside, and beyond it was a space almost the size of a city. The signal came from within that hollow space. The ground seemed to hum gently under their boots. At night, Mara sat outside the station and looked at the stars. She thought of the stories she had heard from other explorers about ruins and lost ships and ancient cities, but none of them had been alive in this way. She wondered if the thing they Where hearing was aware of them. If it was waiting, she did not tell the others about that thought. The next morning, the dig went on. They began to clear sand along the side of the crystal wall. In some places it was carved with strange shapes like flowing lines and spirals. The carvings seemed to change when they looked at them from different angles, as if the wall did not like to be seen clearly. Slick came one last time to the edge of the pit. His voice carried down to them in the still air. He said, 4,000 years ago, this was sealed not by my people, but by many. It was agreed that it must never be opened. And now you are close to breaking that promise. Mara looked up at him. The wind lifted the sand between them, and she felt the weight of his words, but she also felt the pull of the sound still deep below. The team had crossed the point where they could turn back. The machines were already cutting a path toward an entrance that seemed to spiral downward into the earth. The breathing sound was louder now, like a slow drum inside the walls of the pit. Whatever was down there had been waiting for a very long time, and soon they would see it. A black crystal wall stood before them, like the side of a sleeping mountain. Its surface reflected the desert sun in dull glimmers, and the strange shapes carved into it seemed to move when the eye lingered too long. Mara stood at the edge of the pit with her arms folded. She had been in many strange places in her life, but never had she felt a silence this heavy. Even the wind seemed to stay away from this place. The team had worked for hours to clear the wall until they found a narrow break near the ground. It was not an opening yet, but it was different from the rest of the wall. The break formed a line that curved downward as if leading into the earth. Var knelt beside it, running his fingers along the smooth surface. It feels warm, he said. Warm like something alive. Mara put her hand there too, and felt a slow, deep pulse like the beat of a drum somewhere far inside the wall. They brought the cutting tools, but the moment the first spark touched the crystal, the air changed. The breathing sound they had been hearing through the scanners suddenly came through the ground itself. The sand under their boots shifted with the rhythm of it. Selleck appeared above them at the rim of the pit. His tall shadow stretched down the wall. His voice carried over the dry air. Stop now, he called. You are at the door. This place does not belong to you. Mara did not answer. She gave a small nod to Var, and the tools began again. The work was slow. The crystal resisted every cut, but after many hours a narrow doorway appeared leading into a dark passage. The air that escaped was warmer than the desert air. It smelled faintly of minerals and something older than memory. They set lights along the passage and began their descent. The steps were wide and shallow, carved from the same black crystal. The walls here were smooth, but there were marks that looked like they had been made by hands. Long ago, human hands, perhaps, Mara thought, as she ran her palm along the cold surface. As they moved deeper, the light from the surface faded. The hum of the chamber grew louder. It seemed to speak through the floor and the walls. It was not just sound anymore, it was feeling. Mara noticed her heartbeat starting to match the rhythm without her willing it. Var glanced back at her with wide eyes, as if he felt the same. After 100 steps, the passage opened into a narrow hall with pillars on each side. Each pillar was shaped like a figure wrapped in flowing cloth. The faces were hidden beneath hoods, but their hands were raised as if in warning. Between the pillars, the walls were lined with more carvings, spirals, lines, and symbols that shimmered faintly under the light of their lamps. One of the team members, Lena, stopped in front of a carving. Her voice was soft as she traced a line of symbols. These are not just decorations, she said. This is a story. Mara stepped beside her. The carving showed a group of figures standing around a great object shaped like a coffin or a long chamber. Above them, many stars were carved with careful lines. Around the coffin, shapes of different creatures appeared, some with wings, some with long tails, all of them looking down in fear. Lena pointed to the next panel. Here the same object is lowered into the ground. The creatures stand above it with hands raised. A circle of light surrounds them all. Selleck had spoken of a ceiling. Mara thought this could be the record of it. But if it was sealed, then who was inside, and why did the signal? Start now after 4,000 years. They moved on. The air was thicker here, as if they were walking into the lungs of the earth. The hum grew so steady that it felt like walking beside a giant heart. The walls seemed to tremble gently with each breath. At the end of the hall, they found another stairway. It wound downward in a slow spiral, and the crystal steps seemed to glow faintly from within. The light was not bright, but it made the shapes on the wall shift and sway like shadows dancing. Var stopped. Halfway down, he turned to Mara. "I keep hearing something," he said, "a voice, but not in my ears. It is in my head." Mara listened, but heard nothing beyond the hum. She told him to keep moving, but inside she felt a flicker of unease. At last they reached the base of the spiral. It opened into a vast chamber, so large their lights could not touch the far walls. The floor was smooth crystal, and in the center stood a massive door taller than any building in their camp. It was covered in flowing designs that seemed alive. The breathing sound was now as loud as a slow drumbeat right beneath their feet. Mara stepped closer. She felt the vibration through her boots and into her legs. Var placed his hand on the door and closed his eyes. He whispered, "It is waiting for us." Mara looked at him sharply, but before she could ask what he meant, Selik's voice echoed from the stair above. "You are standing on the edge of the oldest danger in this world. Turn back now, or none of you will leave." Mara looked up at him. His silver eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. She felt the weight of his warning, but the pull of the chamber was stronger. They had come too far. The air here felt alive, as if the whole place was breathing around them. She stepped up to the center of the door and pressed her palm against it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the lines on the surface lit up with a dim golden light. The hum deepened, and the chamber seemed to lean closer, as if listening to her touch. The others gathered behind her, waiting for her command. Mara turned to them. Her voice was calm but steady. "We go forward," she said. "This is what we came for." When that the forbidden descent became more than just a journey downward. It became a step into something that had been waiting for 4,000 years. The golden light along the great door's surface moved like water flowing through carved lines. The designs glowed brighter with every second, and the steady hum of the chamber grew deeper. The air pressed against their ears and chests as if the space itself was alive. Mara stood at the center, hand still on the door. Her heart beat slowly in time with the deep rhythm around them. Var stepped closer to the glowing lines. He bent his head to listen, and his eyes widened. "I can hear it more clearly now," he said. "It is not just breathing. It is speaking." His voice was quiet, but the words carried through the still air. Mara looked at him sharply. "What is it saying?" Var shook his head as if trying to clear it. "The words are strange. They feel more like thoughts than sounds. Something about time running out." The rest of the team spread out to study the door. The designs were endless spirals and loops crossing each other like rivers of light. In some places, the lines formed shapes that almost looked like faces with closed eyes, but they faded if you stared too long. Lena traced one of the spirals with her glove. Her fingers tingled, as if she had touched an electric current. Selik remained near the stairway. His tall frame was stiff, his silver eyes never leaving the door. He spoke in a low voice. "This seal was not meant to open by itself. You are making a mistake." Mara ignored him and turned to Var. "Can we open it?" He hesitated. "The patterns are moving like they are unlocking themselves. Maybe it does not need us to force it. Maybe it has been waiting." As if to answer, the crystal under their feet began to tremble. Small streams of dust fell from the high ceiling, and the breathing sound shifted. It became faster, like something inside was waking. The lines of light on the door brightened to a warm gold, then slowly to a pale white glow. The team stepped back, except for Mara. She kept her hand pressed to the center circle, where the lines all met. Beneath her palm, she felt a pulse so strong it seemed to push her backward. She planted her feet and stayed there. A faint crack appeared in the center of the door, not a break in the crystal, but a seam glowing from Within the seam widened slowly. The air rushed past them warm and heavy, carrying a faint scent of minerals and something almost metallic. The hum deepened into a tone that made their bones feel heavy. Mara's ears rang with it. Var shielded his eyes from the growing light as the two halves of the great door began to move apart without a sound. Beyond the door was darkness so deep that their lights could not reach the end. It was not empty, though. The moment the door opened fully, the breathing sound rolled out of the space beyond like a wave washing over them. Mara felt her own chest rise and fall with the same slow rhythm without meaning to. Her thoughts seemed heavier, slower, as if the air itself carried weight. They stepped forward as one drawn by something they could not name, the floor beyond. The door was smooth black crystal, the same as the walls, but it reflected their lights, strangely bending them and making the shadows stretch and twist. In the far distance, a faint shape began to appear as their eyes adjusted. It was massive, its outline hazy at first, but slowly taking form under the glow of their lamps. A long structure lay in the center of the space, raised slightly from the floor. Its surface was the color of ash, but shone faintly under the light. It was the size of a transport ship, its sides carved with lines that curved like the flow of water. Mara stopped in her tracks. Her voice was low and steady. "That is a coffin." The word felt strange here, but there was no other name for it. The breathing sound came from it, not from the walls, not from the floor, but from within this single immense object. The team moved closer. The carvings on the sides were unlike the ones on the door. These were smoother, almost fluid, shifting slightly when seen from different angles. Var crouched near one end and placed his ear to the surface. He drew back quickly and stared at Mara. "It is alive," he whispered. "It is breathing just like us, but slower, much slower." Mara's gaze traveled along the length of the coffin. She saw symbols inlaid into the surface in faint silver lines. They seemed to tell a story, though she could not read the language. At the center near the top, a circular panel pulsed faintly in time with the breath. Lena joined her eyes, tracing the symbols. "This is the same style as the carvings upstairs," she said. "The story continues here." She pointed to a series of shapes, a figure like a human standing among many alien shapes. They all face the same direction, towards something that looks like a star or maybe a planet. In the next image, the figure is lying in a chamber while alien hands seal it with light. Then the last panel shows the chamber deep under layers of rock and crystal. Selig had stepped forward now, though his steps were slow. He stood near the coffin, his face unreadable. "This is no ordinary grave," he said. "It was never meant for the dead. It was meant to keep something alive until the right moment." Mara turned to him. "The right moment for what?" Selig's eyes met hers. "For your kind," he said softly. For humans, a strange shiver passed through the group. The hum from the coffin seemed to respond to those words, growing slightly louder and warmer. The air thickened around them, and for a moment, Mara thought she heard something faint in her own mind. Like a whisper, without sound. Var put a hand on her shoulder. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with curiosity. "If this thing is for humans, we have to know why. We have to open it." Mara looked at the massive form before them. Her instincts told her that opening it could change everything, but also that walking away now would leave them with questions they could never answer. Breathing continued slow and steady, filling the vast chamber with its rhythm. Whatever was inside had been waiting a very long time, and it knew they were here. The vast chamber was silent, except for the slow, deep breathing that came from the massive coffin in the center. The sound filled every corner of the space and seemed to move through the crystal walls like a pulse of life. Mara stood close to it, her palm resting against the smooth surface. The warmth beneath her hand was strange. It was not the heat of a machine, but the steady living warmth of something alive. Var walked slowly around the coffin, studying every line and curve. The silver symbols that ran along its sides seemed brighter now, as if their presence had awakened them. He spoke without looking up. "The more I study this, the more it feels like it has been waiting for us specifically. Not just anyone, but humans. Mara kept her eyes on the surface. She thought of the carvings they had seen earlier, the figures of many alien races working together to bury this chamber. Whatever was inside had been important enough to unite them in a single task. Lena approached from the far end of the coffin. She had been tracing the patterns with her fingers, and her voice was almost a whisper. The lines here, they tell a warning. She pointed to a section where the symbols formed sharp, angular shapes. These marks are unlike the rest. They are meant to say danger or keep sealed. Slick stood a short distance away. His tall frame cast a long shadow on the crystal floor. His voice was calm but heavy. This is no treasure you have found. It is not a gift. This was placed here because it was too dangerous to be left free. Mara turned to him. Then why does it breathe? Why is it still alive after all this time? Selik's silver eyes glimmered. Because it was meant to survive until now. He paused until the silence stretched. You do not understand. Some dangers are not meant to be destroyed. They are meant to be contained forever. The words echoed in the chamber, but Var shook his head. Maybe it was dangerous then, but maybe it is different now. Maybe we can control it. We have learned so much since those days. Mara said nothing. She felt the slow breath through her hands, steady and endless. It was almost comforting, as if the being inside was calm, despite being sealed for thousands of years. They began setting up equipment to scan the coffin. The machines hummed softly, sending waves of sound and light into the structure. The readings came back in strange patterns, unlike any life they had recorded. The heart rate, if it could be called, that was impossibly slow, one beat every 2 minutes. The rest of the time the being seemed completely still. Var adjusted the scanner, his eyes fixed on the display. This thing is enormous, yet the readings show it is not just mass. It is energy too, a living body made of both matter and something else, something we do not have. Mara frowned. Could that be why they were afraid of it? Var nodded. Maybe, but it could also mean it has abilities we do not understand. While the scans continued, Mara walked around the chamber walls. She found more carvings hidden in the shadows, showing ships in the sky above a young planet. The same human figure from before stood on its surface, surrounded by alien races. Some reached out to the figure, while others turned away in fear. In the final carving, the figure lay inside a chamber, just like this one, sealed by beams of light from many different hands. She returned to the coffin and looked at the circular panel in its center. It pulsed faintly in the same rhythm as the breath. Var joined her. If this is the control point, it might be the way to open it. His voice was low, as if speaking too loudly might wake the sleeper. Mara asked, "Can we open it without harming what is inside?" Var hesitated. The systems are old, but still active. We understood the pattern. We could release the lock safely. Selik stepped forward, his voice sharper. Now you speak as if you have the right to open this. You do not. If you break this seal, there will be no going back. Mara faced him firmly. Then tell us what exactly is inside. Selik's eyes were unreadable. A traveler, he said softly. One who came before your people were known to the stars. One who frightened the oldest powers in the galaxy, enough that they buried him here. His voice lowered again. The breathing you hear is the sound of a prison still holding. The chamber seemed to grow colder, though the air stayed warm. The slow inhale and exhale of the coffin filled their ears. Var's hand hovered over the control panel. He looked at Mara. We have a choice now. Leave it here and never know, or open it and face whatever waits inside. Mara looked at the team. She saw curiosity in their faces, but also unease. She took a deep breath and stepped back from the panel. We will not open it yet. We will learn everything we can first. If this being has waited 4,000 years, it can wait a little longer. The decision eased some tension in the room, but the pull of the coffin remained strong. The slow, steady breath continued as if the sleeper inside was patient beyond all human measure. They set up camp in the outer hall, taking turns to watch the chamber. Var spent long hours studying the pulse patterns, while Lena tried to translate more of the warning symbols. Selik kept his distance. but never left the room entirely. He watched them with an expression Mara could not read. That night, Mara sat alone near the edge of the great door. The glow from the coffin lit the far wall in faint silver. She thought about what Selleck had said about a traveler from before human history. If that was true, then the sleeper might know truths no one else remembered. Maybe he carried knowledge that could change the course of human progress or even the balance of power in the galaxy. The thought stirred both hope and fear in Hirsch. Returned to the coffin and placed her hand on it once more. The warmth was still there, the rhythm of the breath steady as ever. She closed her eyes and for a moment felt as if the breath matched her own. The sense of connection was brief but deep. She stepped back slowly, unsure if she had imagined it when she looked at Var. She saw that he was staring at her strangely. "Did you hear it?" he asked. Mara frowned. "Hear what?" Var's voice dropped. "The voice in your head. The one saying it is time." Mara stared at the coffin. The breath continued deep and slow as if waiting for her answer. The chamber was quiet except for the deep, slow breath coming from the massive coffin. The sound had become so familiar that it felt like part of the air itself. Mara stood near the control panel in the center of the coffin. Her fingers hovered over it, but she did not touch. The faint pulse of light moved in steady circles under the smooth surface, as if following a rhythm only it understood. Ver was beside her, studying the readings from his scanner. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright. With focus, his voice was low. "This thing is more than just a life form. It is a power source, too. I think it is feeding on something inside this chamber, or maybe the chamber is feeding it. Either way, if the breathing stops, the energy will vanish forever." Mara listened, but her eyes stayed on the pulsing light. She could feel it almost calling to her. Lena came forward, holding a small pad covered in copied symbols. "I think I have translated more of the carvings," she said. "They say the sleeper holds the key to a path that only humans can walk. The words are old and strange, but the meaning is clear. This being was sealed not to die, but to wait for us." Mara's thoughts tightened around that idea. Waiting for humans. Selleck had hinted at the same thing, but never explained why. Slick now stepped closer. His silver eyes reflected the faint glow of the coffin. His voice was steady but sharp. "You should not mistake a key for a gift. Some doors should never be opened. The ones who sealed this were not your enemies. They were trying to protect the galaxy." Mara asked, "Protect it from what?" Selleck did not answer. He only said, "If you open this, there will be no turning back." The team gathered in a circle just beyond the glow of the coffin. They had been avoiding this conversation for hours, but now it could not be delayed. Var spoke first. "If this thing really has waited for us, then maybe it has knowledge that could help us against the alien powers that keep pushing humanity aside. We have seen what they think of us. We are small to them. Maybe this could change that." Lena nodded, but her voice was careful. "It could be the greatest discovery in history, but it could also be the greatest danger. We do not know what it will do if it wakes." Mara looked from one face to the next. They all carried the same mixture of fear and curiosity. Only Selleck's expression was fixed and cold. The valid from the coffin seemed to grow louder, as if it knew they were deciding. The breath was still slow, but deeper now. The light at the control panel pulsed with a stronger glow. Var glanced at it, then Mara. "If we do nothing, this thing might die. The pulse patterns are getting weaker. I think its energy is running out." Mara frowned. "Are you sure?" Var nodded. "I am not saying we must release it, but if it stops breathing, whatever it is will be lost forever." The thought weighed on Mara. She had spent her life chasing the unknown, but always with the safety of turning back if things went wrong. This was different. There would be no turning back once the seal was broken. She looked at Selleck again. "If we leave it here, what will happen?" He answered simply, "It will sleep until it fades to nothing. That is the safest choice." The room felt heavier. The glow of the coffin painted the crystal floor in pale gold. The breath seemed to fill their chests, whether they wanted it to or not. Mara felt the pull again. not just in her mind, but deep in her bones. She thought of the carvings, the human figure. Surrounded by stars and alien races, she thought of the idea that this being had been sent for them. Finally, she spoke. If this is a danger, then we will face it. If it is a gift, then we will use it. But I will not walk away and wonder for the rest of my life. She stepped toward the panel. Var moved beside her, ready to help. Selek's voice rose sharply. You will regret this. But Mara did not stop. Var placed his hand on one side of the panel. Mara placed hers on the other. The pulse of light grew brighter and warmer. It began to move faster, circling inward toward the center. A low tone rose from the coffin, and the walls of the chamber trembled. The breathing sound quickened into a rhythm like the first moments of waking. Lina stepped back, her eyes wide. The patterns on the floor are moving, she said. The crystal beneath them shifted faintly, as if alive. Thin lines of light ran outward from the coffin to the far walls and up toward the high ceiling. Dust fell from above, but the structure did not break. The entire chamber was alive with the same pulse. Mara and Var pressed their hands deeper into the panel. The light flared once, then split into a dozen lines. Each line moved along the coffin's surface, unlocking hidden seams with a soundless motion. The deep hum became a steady tone. The breath stopped for the first time since they had entered the chamber. The silence was so sudden, it made the hair on their arms rise. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the seams of the coffin began to part. The surface shifted smoothly and silently, pulling back to reveal what lay inside. A faint white mist spilled out across the floor. It swirled around their feet, cold and thin. The interior of the coffin glowed softly from within, and in the center, suspended in a field of golden light, was a human face. The skin was pale but untouched by time. The hair floated gently as if in water. The eyes were closed, but the chest moved with one final slow breath. Selek's voice was barely a whisper. You have done it now. The chamber seemed to lean closer as the figure's eyes began to open. The figure inside the golden light opened his eyes slowly. They were deep and clear, like a calm sea untouched by storms. For a moment, the entire chamber seemed to pause. No one spoke, no one moved. The only sound was the soft, fading echo of the last breath from the coffin. Mara felt her own breathing slow as she looked at him. He did not look confused or afraid. Instead, there was a quiet knowing in his gaze, as if he had expected this moment for a very long time. His eyes moved from Mara to Var, then to Lina, and finally to Selek, who stood frozen near the door. Golden light around him faded slowly until he was standing on the crystal floor. His steps were steady, though he had been sealed for thousands of years. He looked at his surroundings with calm recognition, running his hand along the inside edge of the coffin like greeting an old friend. Mara was the first to speak. Who are you? The man turned his head toward her. His voice was low but carried through the vast chamber. I am from where you are from. His words were simple, but they carried weight. I came from Earth, before it was known to the stars, before your people could name them. Mara's thoughts spun. She had expected many answers, but not this far. Stepped forward. How long have you been here? The man looked up toward the high ceiling. 4,000 years, give or take. The time has been long, but my mind was never fully asleep. Mara glanced at Selek. His expression was tight and unreadable. She asked, why were you sealed? Away the man walked a few steps toward them. The glow from the coffin still clung faintly to his skin. I was sent to travel beyond what was known. I found worlds and peoples that feared what I could do. I was not a soldier. I was not a ruler. I was a traveler, but they saw in me the seed of something they could not allow. His eyes darkened. They joined together and put me here until the time they feared would come. The time when humanity would reach beyond the small corner they had given you. Lina held the translation pad tightly. The carvings upstairs. They said you were a key. The man nodded. Yes, a key to doors they have kept closed from you, and now you have chosen to turn the lock. Slick stepped forward, his voice firm. Enough. You were sealed. For a reason, you cannot be trusted. The man turned his gaze on him. You still speak for those who fear me. Selek, I know your kind. You stood among those who buried me, and you still carry their fear. Selek did not answer, but his hands curled tightly. At his sides, Mara's voice cut through the tension. If you are telling the truth, then why send a signal? Why breathe so loud that we could find you? The man's expression softened because I could not break my own prison, but I could let you hear that I was still alive. The breathing was my voice. The rhythm was my call to you, Mara. It took longer than I thought, but here you are, Revar. Step closer, studying the man's face. What do you want from us? The man looked at each of them in turn. Want to finish what I began. I want to see your people free to walk the stars, without chains of fear. There is a path to that. Freedom, but it will mean conflict with those who have ruled over you. Mara felt the weight in his words. He was not asking for their help. He was telling them what would come. The silence that followed was heavy. The chamber itself seemed to hold its breath now that the steady rhythm had ended. The warmth that had filled the air was fading, leaving a strange stillness. Mara realized that without the coffin's breath, the space felt almost hollow. Selek's voice was cold. Do not follow him. His path will burn everything you know. The man replied calmly. It will burn only the cage you have built. Mara's eyes moved. Between them, both spoke with conviction, but only one of them had been buried for 4,000 years. Var spoke again. If you truly want to help us, then prove it. Give us something we can use now to defend ourselves against the alien powers. The man smiled faintly. I can give you more than weapons. I can give you the knowledge to build what they cannot stop. Ships that move faster than their gates. Worlds that cannot be taken without cost. But I will not give them to you here. We must leave this place. Mara asked why the man's gaze shifted toward the far walls. Because this chamber is not just my prison. It is also my cage of weakness. It was built to keep me alive, but contained. The longer I stay, the weaker I become. A low rumble rolled through the floor, as if to prove his point. The lines of light along the walls flickered and dimmed. Var checked the scanner. The energy levels are dropping fast. Mara understood now. The breathing had been a sign of life, but also a sign of the chamber's stability. Now that it had stopped, the structure was beginning to fail. We need to get out, Mara said quickly. The man nodded. Lead the way. The team gathered their equipment with quick movements. Selek lingered a moment, his eyes still locked on the man, but then he turned and followed. They moved through the wide hall past the carved pillars. The air seemed heavier now, and fine cracks appeared along the crystal walls. Small pieces broke away and fell to the floor. The glow that had guided them earlier was fading, leaving more shadows than light. At the spiral stair, the man paused, placing his hand on the wall for a moment. He closed his eyes, then followed without a word. They climbed upward into the long passage to the surface. The hum that had been with them since the first step inside was gone, replaced by the faint groan of shifting stone. When they reached the narrow break in the wall where the dig had begun, they could see sunlight pouring, and the air from outside rushed past them, carrying the scent of sand and wind. Mara felt her chest lighten at the sight. The man stepped out first, blinking against the sun, as if remembering its warmth behind them. The ground gave a deep shudder. A thin cloud of dust rose into the air, and the sound of crystal breaking echoed from below. The chamber was collapsing, sealing itself again. Mara watched the dust swirl away into the desert sky. She knew they had taken something from a place that had not been meant to open. The man stood on the sand, looking out over the wide, empty valley. He turned to Mara. His voice was calm. Now the real journey begins. The sun hung low in the sky, turning the desert into a golden sea. The heat pressed down on them, but none of the team cared. Their minds were on the man who now walked beside them. His presence was both strange and familiar, like meeting a relative whose name had been forgotten, but whose face felt known. They made camp on a ridge far from the dig site. The man sat on the sand, looking at the horizon as the wind stirred his hair. He did not speak for a long time. Mara watched him and wondered if he was remembering the world as it was thousands of years ago. Finally, he turned to her. Your people have grown much since I last walked the surface, he said. You have reached the stars, but you do not own your path. Mara nodded. She knew what he meant. Humanity had ships and colonies, but they always paid tribute to the alien council. They had rules that kept humans from building stronger fleets or claiming certain worlds. Var leaned forward. You said you could give us ships faster than their gates. How is that possible? The man smiled faintly. There are ways to fold space without their technology. The knowledge was once ours, but they erased it from your history. I kept it safe in my mind. Mara asked, why not write it down? He shook his head. If I wrote it, they would find it. If I carried it in my mind, only I could guard it. Selleck sat apart from the group, but his voice carried. You speak of giving fire to children. What happens when they burn themselves? The man looked at him. You still think of humanity as something that must be protected from itself. You forget that your own masters were once children who learned to hold fire without fear. Lena shifted uncomfortably. She had been quiet since leaving the chamber. Now she spoke softly. If we take this knowledge, we will be seen as a threat. The council will not allow it. The man's eyes narrowed. Then they will try to stop you, but they cannot stop all of you at once. The wind grew stronger, carrying the sound of shifting sand. The man reached into a small pouch at his side and pulled out a thin metallic shard. Its surface shimmered with patterns that seemed to move on their own. He held it out to Mara. This is the first piece. It holds the base code for the drive you will build. It is useless alone, but with the rest, it will change everything. Mara took it carefully, feeling its strange warmth. Where are the rest? She asked. Hidden, he replied, in places they cannot reach. Some are on your worlds, some on worlds you have never seen. I will guide you to them, but we must move quickly. Their sensors will already have felt the collapse of my prison. Selleck rose to his feet. Then they will be here soon, and when they come, what will you do? Stand and fight? The man stood as, well, no, we will not give them the fight they want. We will make them chase us across the stars until they can no longer hold their grip on you. Night came slowly and the desert cooled. The stars appeared one by one, bright and unblinking. The man sat apart again, gazing upward. Mara joined him. After a while she asked, what was Earth like when you left? His eyes softened. It was young, but already restless oceans untouched by metal skies with no trails of ships. But in the hearts of its people there was always the need to step beyond. I was sent with a small crew. We never returned because we found something greater. But the price was heavy. Mara wanted to ask more, but a sharp sound from Var made her turn. He was holding his scanner high. Something's in the sky, he said. The others looked up. A faint glimmer moved against the stars, growing brighter. It was not falling, it was descending slowly. Selleck's voice was tense. They found us. The man's expression did not change. Then our journey begins. Sooner than I thought. They packed quickly. The man led them across the sand toward a cluster of jagged rocks. Half buried among them was a craft unlike any Mara had seen. Its shape was smooth and curved like a drop of water frozen in the air. The surface reflected the stars in the sand, but seemed to bend the light in strange ways. This is yours? Mara asked. The man touched the side of the craft and a thin seam of light opened, forming an entrance. Not mine, he said. Yours. He stepped inside and they followed. The interior was small but bright, with no visible controls, yet it responded to his movements. The walls shimmered as if alive as soon as the entrance sealed. The craft rose smoothly above the sand. The desert fell away beneath them, and the stars grew sharper. The glimmer in the sky shifted course as if following, but the man's hands moved lightly along the wall and the craft leapt forward. The stars stretched into lines and then into a swirling tunnel of light. Mara gripped the seat. This is faster than any jump we have. The man's voice was calm. This is only the beginning. He looked at her and Var. You will learn to make more of these. You will teach others. Soon there will be hundreds, then thousands. They cannot stop. What they cannot catch, Slick sat silent, watching the swirling light outside. Mara knew he still did not trust the man. But trust or not, they were now on a path that would change everything. After a time, the craft slowed and the stars returned normal. The man pointed toward a distant world, half hidden by the glow of a nearby sun. There is the first safe place, a colony forgotten by the council. They will not look for you there. We will begin your training. Mara stared at the planet, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. She thought of the chamber, the breathing, the collapse. She thought of the shard, now hidden in her pack. The man looked at them all and spoke quietly. You are not just travelers now. You are the heirs of what was once yours. And when the time comes, you will take it back. The craft turned toward the hidden world and vanished into the dark, leaving behind the empty desert and the broken chamber beneath it. But somewhere far below the shifting sands, a faint pulse began. Again, slow and steady, like a breath waiting for the next to be taken.